The Young and the Restless spoilers Monday full episodes July 21st, 2025 Jack Abbott had reached his limit. For years, he had tried to rationalize his younger brother's erratic behavior, painting it with the brushstrokes of empathy, excusing it as fallout from childhood pain or the scars of addiction, betrayal, and failure. He had watched Billy chase every shiny object, abandon every commitment, and implode every time stability came knocking. And each time, Jack picked up the pieces. Each time, Jack offered him another chance. Another project. Another title. Another trust fund. But now, the Billy-ness of Billy had evolved into something Jack could no longer excuse. It had become sabotage. Selfish. Destructive. Loud. Jack had tried to keep peace within the family, hoping that if he simply gave Billy what he wanted, the younger man would finally calm down, feel seen, and do the right thing. But that wasn't how Billy operated. Billy didn't want structure. He wanted chaos. He thrived in it, swimming through messes of his own making and blaming the world when it turned to smoke. And now, as Jack stood in the Jabot boardroom, watching Billy hurl accusations and shout about independence, Jack realized something dark. Maybe Billy didn't want a seat at the table. Maybe he just wanted to flip the table over. Jack had recently entrusted Billy with leadership over a newly formed division of the company, even funneling a substantial amount of capital to fund it. He had hoped the responsibility would ground him, focus his impulses, remind him that he had a family name to protect. But instead, Billy treated the opportunity like a joke. He missed meetings. He launched extravagant marketing ideas without approval. He courted scandal for the sake of attention. And when Jack finally asked him to slow down, to lead the company like a man and not a boy chasing fireworks, Billy exploded. Accused Jack of manipulating him. Accused him of setting him up to fail. Accused him of never believing in him at all. Jack remained quiet at first, letting his brother spiral, the way he always did. Billy raged, expecting Jack to eventually nod and apologize, to play the calm, forgiving older sibling again. But this time, Jack didn't budge. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't dismiss the anger. He simply looked at Billy, eyes glassy with frustration and resignation, and said the words Billy had never heard from him before, "Maybe it's time I stop helping you." Billy's face drained of color. In that moment, Jack didn't see a partner or a brother. He saw a threat. An unstable man determined to burn bridges simply because they were built without his permission. And he realized that no amount of money, power, or legacy would ever be enough for Billy Abbott. Billy would always want more. More freedom. More glory. More validation. And when the world didn't bend to him, he'd punish everyone who refused to kneel. While the Abbott brothers were imploding behind closed doors, another storm was gathering. Nick Newman stood in the center of the Chancellor Park Pavilion, arms folded, eyes narrowed, his posture broadcasting a silent promise: "I'm taking over." Officially, he had agreed to help Chance with the investigation into Damien's stabbing. Unofficially, he was now treating the entire case as a Newman initiative. He had made it clear, too many people had fumbled the truth for too long. Nick was tired of being the scapegoat. Tired of watching others control the narrative. He was a Newman. Newmans fix things. Newmans take charge. And now, Nick was prepared to clean up the mess, whether or not Chance wanted him to. It started small, offering to re-examine the security footage himself. Asking to sit in on witness interviews. Suggesting the Newman security team assist in cross-checking travel logs. But soon, Nick began bypassing Chance entirely. Calling hospital administrators for records. Pressuring Lily to share details she hadn't even told the police. Tracking movements. Pulling favors. To Nick, this was about redemption. Not just proving his innocence, but reminding everyone, including himself, that he was still powerful, still capable, still in control. But to those watching, including Sharon, it was something far more concerning, a descent into obsession. Sharon had known Nick since before either of them were capable of understanding how complicated life could become. She had seen him at his highest and at his most broken. She knew when his confidence was righteous and when it was masking fear. And right now, she saw a man teetering on the edge. Every time she tried to talk to him, Nick deflected. Told her she was overthinking. That he was fine. That he needed to do this. Sharon saw something else. A man who believed this investigation was his last chance to feel whole again. She tried to intervene quietly. Invited him to coffee. Suggested therapy. Reminded him that Chance was trained for this. That pushing too hard would only push others away. But Nick dismissed her every time. He insisted this was the only way. That no one else had the motivation to uncover the real truth. The irony, of course, was that Nick was slowly becoming the very thing he feared being accused of. Unstable, controlling, volatile. And if he wasn't careful, his so-called rescue mission could destroy more lives than it saved. Meanwhile, Chance was facing his own internal war. As Nick began shadowing him and questioning his every move, the integrity of the case began to slip. Witnesses started to second-guess what they had seen. Nick's presence at meetings made victims feel like suspects. And through it all, Damien's memory remained murky. He had moments of clarity, but every time he tried to speak the full truth, the trauma overwhelmed him. The identity of his attacker danced just beyond the edge of comprehension. And with JT on the run again, the pressure on Chance to deliver answers had reached a boiling point. At the same time, whispers of Jack and Billy's feud were beginning to spread. A disgruntled employee leaked audio of their argument to the press, fueling speculation that the Abbotts were crumbling internally. That kind of narrative was gold to JT, wherever he was hiding. Because as long as the powerful families kept tearing each other apart, no one would be focused enough to catch him. And then came the worst discovery yet. Lily received an anonymous package. Inside, a burner phone. One message. One video. In the clip, Carter, JT in disguise, was standing in the Jabot server room weeks before the gala. Holding a flask. Smiling. Whispering, "Every empire has a fault line. I'm just the Quake." And then he vanished into the dark. Lily showed it to Jack. Jack showed it to Chance. But by then, it was clear, JT had embedded himself deeper than anyone realized. His fingerprints weren't just on the bottle. They were on the fractures now ripping Genoa City apart. And still, Billy wasn't helping. Jack asked him to stay out of it. To lay low until the investigation was over. But Billy, true to form, went rogue. Called a press conference. Denounced the investigation. Claimed the entire system was trying to scapegoat the Abbotts for political gain. He said too much. He hinted at secrets he wasn't supposed to know. And just like that, the media spun it. Did Billy know something? Was he covering for Jack? Or worse, was he involved? Jack watched it all unfold in horror. The damage was done. And now, as the city careened toward another scandal, Jack realized what he should have seen all along. Billy was the fuse JT had been waiting for. And Nick? He was the match. Audra Charles had always known how to command a room. Whether draped in diamonds or stripped down to silk, there was a confidence to her that made people lean in, made men stammer and women watch with wary fascination. But tonight, it wasn't a room she was commanding. It was Kyle Abbott. And they weren't in Genoa City anymore. They were in France, a chateau wrapped in secrecy and sunlight, hidden in the hills of Nice, where the past came to play and futures were quietly rewritten. Audra stood in the hallway just outside Kyle's guest room, dressed in little more than a lace wrap, her skin glowing under the dimmed gold sconces. She didn't knock. She didn't speak. She just walked, slowly, deliberately, past the threshold of his awareness, her presence pressing against the boundaries of propriety and reason. How long had it been since they arrived in France? A few days? A week? Time had warped here, tangled in wine and lies and unfamiliar beds. But Kyle remembered clearly the last time he had seen Claire. It had been just before the trip. Just before things with Summer had once again collapsed under the weight of unresolved feelings. And while he hadn't planned for anything to happen in France, he had known, deep down, that something would. Now, that something had a name. Audra. Kyle wasn't a fool. He knew Audra was dangerous. That every move she made came with an invisible clause, a catch, a price. But he also knew that she was intoxicating, and he had been drunk on denial for too long. Being with her was like standing on the edge of a cliff and daring gravity to take you. He let himself fall. The moment her fingers brushed his collar, it was over. They hadn't even spoken. There had been no preamble, no hesitation. Just skin, heat, and a kind of reckless surrender that only people running from something can share. For Kyle, it was the ache of lost love. For Audra, it was the thrill of control. Whatever it was real. And it was not going away. Meanwhile, back in Genoa City, Nick Newman was unraveling. He had always tried to be the strong one, the anchor, the fixer. But now, he was reduced to a mess of tears and paranoia, crashing into his parents' living room with wild eyes and a voice cracking from desperation. He insisted that he had been set up. That he had never touched Damien with a knife. That someone, he didn't know who, was trying to destroy him. Victor and Nikki listened with growing concern. Victor had seen his son broken before, but this was different. This was a man who no longer trusted reality. And the worst part? There was just enough evidence to make his fears credible. The knife. The security footage. The inconsistencies. It all looked bad. And Nick knew it. Phyllis, however, wasn't losing any sleep. In fact, she was gloating. Proud of herself. Pleased with her own genius. She had always considered herself the smartest person in the room, and this time, she believed she had outdone even her own expectations. She had whispered a theory into someone's ear. Suggested a shift in perspective. Manipulated a few facts. It hadn't taken much to point suspicion toward Nick and away from the person who really needed time to disappear. And now, she strutted through the chateau halls of the Dumas estate like a queen surveying her territory, barely masking the satisfaction she felt every time someone mentioned Nick's predicament. But then came the twist she hadn't counted on. Phyllis had come to France with a mission. She wasn't here to relax, or to stir up drama. Though that always seemed to follow her anyway. No, she came to find the elusive and powerful man known only as Dumas. Rumors swirled that he held influence over Chancellor Industries, that he had the kind of leverage that could shift corporate power in an instant. Phyllis, ever the strategist, wanted to broker a deal. She wanted Chancellor. She wanted control. And she had convinced herself that Dumas was the key. For weeks, she chased shadows, followed whispers. And then, finally, she found him. Except Dumas wasn't who she expected. He wasn't a European tycoon. He wasn't an old money ghost from the past. He was Cain Ashby. The revelation hit her like a slap across the face. She had known Cain for years, had shared alliances, rivalries, and complicated history. But never once had she imagined he could reinvent himself to such a degree, to vanish and re-emerge as a man of power, secrecy, and global clout. Phyllis stood in the grand library of the estate, staring at him, her mind racing. Cain, Dumas, just smiled. "You're not the only one who knows how to play long games, Red," he said smoothly. The moment rewrote everything. Cain had been hiding in plain sight. He had reinvented himself to gain leverage, and now, with Damien bleeding and Nick spiraling, he was poised to take control of Chancellor without ever lifting a public finger. But there was more. Phyllis sensed it. Kane had been too calm, too rehearsed. There was something he wasn't saying. Something deeper. She started connecting dots. Carter. The assistant who vanished after JT's reveal. The way Kane had been just out of frame in so many key moments. Could he have known? Could Kane have harbored JT? Protected him? Or, worse, helped him? Back in Genoa City, Sharon was still trying to save Nick from himself. He had grown manic, insisting he could prove his innocence by taking over the investigation. He hounded Chance for details, questioned witnesses, demanded security footage. Sharon watched with growing dread as the man she once loved lost himself in the pursuit of vindication. She knew Nick. When he believed the world was against him, he became dangerous, not to others, but to himself. He would burn bridges. Push people away. And if someone didn't stop him, he would crash and blame the wreckage on his reflection. Meanwhile, the investigation itself was stalling. Damien, still recovering, remained in fragile condition. His memory of the attack flickered like static. Some days, he claimed to remember the face of his attacker. Other days, he said it was too dark. Chance was running out of leads. And JT? Vanished. Back in France, Kyle and Audra sat in the aftermath of their night together, the air heavy with unspoken truths. Kyle knew this was more than just lust. He felt drawn to her in ways he couldn't explain. But he also sensed danger. Audra wasn't careless. She moved with intent. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he wondered if she had orchestrated this encounter, if their intimacy was part of something larger. Phyllis, too, was spiraling. What had begun as a brilliant scheme was now feeling like a chess game where she couldn't see the board. Kane Dumas was too unreadable. JT's involvement, the poisoning, the setup of Nick, and now the power vacuum around Chancellor Industries, it all felt connected. She didn't trust Kane. Not anymore. She returned to her suite that night and opened her laptop. If Kane was Dumas and Carter was JT, then who else was hiding in plain sight? She began scanning documents, company records, photos from the gala. And then she found it, a picture taken the night before Damien was stabbed. In the background, Kane and Carter, heads together, whispering. Not an accident. Not a coincidence. She leaned back in her chair, heart pounding. Either she had walked into a power play bigger than she ever imagined, or she was next. And somewhere, not far from her window, JT Hellstrom watched the light from her room flicker and smiled.